Back then, I chased money. I believed it was the answer, the cure to every insecurity, the proof of worth, the key to freedom. I thought if I could just earn enough, save enough, own enough, I'd finally feel like I'd made it. But that chase, that obsession, it doesn't start with greed, it starts with fear. The fear of being nothing. The fear of being left behind. The fear that if you stop running, someone else will take your place. We grow up in a world that worships the chase. It teaches us that value is measurable, that if people can't see your success, you don't have any. So, we begin the race early. We count every dollar, every promotion, every milestone, believing we're stacking proof that we matter. But in the silence of our rooms, when no one's watching, the anxiety creeps in. Because deep down, we know, this chase never ends. You see, the problem with chasing money is not money itself. Money is neutral, a tool, a mirror. The real trap is the belief that more will fix what's missing inside. That the void can be filled by digits in a bank account. But the void isn't material, it's spiritual. And no material solution can heal a spiritual wound. I used to look at successful men, the ones with cars, watches, power, and think, they've figured it out. But the more I climbed, the more I saw the truth. They were still running. Different track, same race. Some were richer than I'd ever imagined, but emptier than I'd ever feared. And that terrified me, because it meant that what I was chasing might not even exist. There's an old teaching, what you pursue, you become a slave to. And if that pursuit is endless, so is the slavery. The man who chases money is never free, even when he catches it. Because he's trained his mind to believe that peace lies just beyond the next goal. And when he gets there, peace moves again, a mirage on the horizon. In the modern world, we don't question the chase because everyone's in it. We call it hustle, ambition, grind, words that sound noble. But let's be honest, how many of us are grinding for purpose, and how many are grinding for validation? How many of us are working for a life we want, versus a lifestyle we think we should want? We confuse motion with meaning, productivity with purpose. And in that confusion, we lose ourselves. It's not wrong to want money. It's wrong to worship it. It's wrong to trade your presence for it, your peace for it, your relationships for it. Because once you do, you'll start to measure your life by how much you can accumulate, and not how much you can experience. You'll start to forget that the reason you wanted money in the first place was to be free. Let me tell you something real. Freedom isn't expensive, it's intentional. Most people could afford freedom if they stopped trying to impress those who already forgot their names. But we're trained to upgrade constantly. Our phones, our clothes, our cars, our lives. We consume to feel alive, but consumption only deepens the hunger. And one day, you wake up realizing you've spent years feeding your ego while starving your soul. Here's the truth. Every man must face a choice between pleasure and peace. Pleasure is easy, peace is earned. Pleasure gives you a hit, a high, a moment. Peace gives you grounding, a foundation that doesn't shake when the world does. Money can buy pleasure, but it can never purchase peace. Because peace is not bought, it's built. And you build it by learning to separate need from desire. You build it by asking yourself, why am I chasing this? What do I think it will give me? You build it by realizing that the value of life is not how much you can accumulate, but how deeply you can live. Here's a principle I learned the hard way. Don't chase what you can't keep. Chase what you can become. Because money comes and goes, but character compounds. Discipline compounds. Self-respect compounds. And when you build those, you'll find that money starts to follow you. You stop chasing, it starts serving. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you're tired. Tired of the grind, tired of pretending, tired of the race that never ends. Maybe a small voice inside you has started whispering, there must be more than this. Listen to it. That's not weakness, that's awareness. That's your soul trying to wake you up before it's too late. I used to think burnout was a sign of weakness. Now I see it as a sign of misalignment. You burn out when you're running in the wrong direction. You drain yourself chasing a prize that doesn't fill you when you get it. So pause. Ask yourself, if I win this race, What exactly do I win? Because if the prize costs your peace, it's not success, it's sacrifice. This part of the journey, the chase, is necessary. Every man must walk through it to understand what truly matters. But the wise man doesn't stay there. He learns, he pivots, he redefines what success means. And that redefinition begins when you stop asking, how can I make more money? And start asking, what do I want my money to give me? Because when the answer shifts from possessions to presence, from consumption to creation, from greed to gratitude, that's when the transformation begins. The chase isn't evil, but chasing the wrong thing will exhaust your soul. You must learn to see money as a tool, not a trophy. It can buy you comfort, but not meaning. It can buy you options, but not direction. It can build a house, but not a home. So take this first truth with you. The goal isn't to escape the chase overnight, it's to become aware of it. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. Because once you see the illusion clearly, you can't unsee it. You start to wake up. You start to wonder. And that wondering, that quiet questioning, becomes the doorway to something far deeper. And that's where the next chapter begins. Not in the chase, but in the moment when you finally pause and ask yourself why you ever started running. The shine fades. The thrill disappears. What once felt like purpose now feels like pressure. You hit your goals, the ones you once believed would change everything, and yet, nothing changes inside. You smile for the world, but you're hollow when the applause ends. Because the truth is, the chase doesn't stop when you reach the milestone. It just resets. You tell yourself, just one more year, one more deal, one more upgrade. But beneath that, a quieter voice asks, and then what? You ignore it. You silence it with new distractions, louder noise, busier schedules. But that voice, the whisper of awareness, keeps returning. It doesn't care how much you've earned. It only cares how much of you is left. The realization creeps in slowly, not through loss, but through fatigue. The kind of exhaustion that money can't fix, the spiritual kind. You start to sense the cost of your success. The hours traded, the relationships strained, the peace you haven't felt in months. And in that space between victory and emptiness, a truth begins to surface. The chase has no finish line. Modern life glorifies endless pursuit. We romanticize the grind, as if exhaustion is proof of worth, and rest is a sin. But what if the very thing we celebrate is what's killing us slowly? What if our constant need for more is the reason we can't feel enough? There's a quote often misattributed but deeply true. Man sacrifices his health to make money. Then he sacrifices his money to recuperate his health. The cycle is poetic in its cruelty. We work ourselves to death for the freedom to live, only to realize we forgot how. It's not that ambition is wrong. It's that ambition without awareness becomes addiction. You start mistaking progress for growth, and motion for meaning. You chase success, not because it fulfills you, but because you're afraid of what happens when you stop. Silence becomes unbearable. Stillness feels like failure. You fear what you'll find in the quiet. But that quiet, that pause, is where awakening begins. Because silence doesn't expose weakness, it reveals truth. And when you sit with yourself long enough, the questions you've buried begin to rise. Why do I want what I want? Who am I trying to prove this to? Most men never ask those questions. They run until their bodies break, or until life forces them to stop. Sometimes it's burnout. Sometimes it's a heartbreak. Sometimes it's a quiet Sunday morning where you realize you don't even know who you are without the chase. The tragedy is that we call this normal. We tell ourselves this is what it means to be driven, to be ambitious, to be strong. But strength isn't about running faster, it's about knowing when to stop. Discipline isn't about pushing endlessly, it's about directing your effort toward what truly matters. I've seen men who have everything and still feel like they're losing. Because the things they built were external, but their foundation was hollow. They mastered business but neglected peace. They chased validation but ignored stillness. They gained the world, and lost themselves in the process. Let's be clear, money can solve problems, but it can't solve emptiness. It can remove discomfort, but not disconnection. It can buy time off, but not the ability to be with yourself. And that's why so many people keep running, not toward wealth, but away from silence. This part of the journey is dangerous, the gray zone. You're successful enough to appear free, but not awake enough to realize you're still trapped. You've built a life of comfort, but not of clarity. And in the comfort, your edge dulls, your spirit weakens. You become addicted to comfort, and that's how ambition dies quietly, disguised as achievement. But this is where the awakening begins. The point where fatigue forces introspection, where you stop looking outward and start looking inward. You start to see that you don't actually crave more money, you crave meaning. You don't want more luxuries, you want more life. You want mornings that belong to you. You want conversations that don't feel rushed. You want to wake up without dread, to sleep without guilt, to breathe without hurry. You want time, and that realization hits you like a truth you've always known but forgotten. You've been chasing the wrong currency. Here's where timeless wisdom returns. The Stoics, centuries ago, already understood what we've forgotten. Asterisk, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Asterisk, Seneca wrote that. And it's still true. We waste our lives not because we lack hours, but because we trade them too cheaply. For approval, for reputation, for things that lose value the moment we buy them. So how do you awaken from this cycle? You start by noticing the cost. Every yes has a price. Every deal has a piece of you attached to it. And if you don't become conscious of what you're trading, life will quietly collect its debt. The debt of presence. The debt of purpose. The debt of peace. There's a principle here. Don't mistake motion for meaning. Every action must align with intention. Every pursuit must answer to purpose. Because energy is finite, and what you give it to, you become. If you feel the fatigue, don't numb it, listen to it. Fatigue is your soul's way of telling you that you're living out of alignment. It's not burnout, it's a breaking point designed to wake you up. You don't need to quit your dreams, you need to question your direction. The truth is, chasing money without consciousness leads to spiritual poverty. You can have millions in the bank and still live bankrupt in your soul. Because wealth without wisdom is just noise. Success without peace is just performance. So, pause. Look at your life. Is what you're chasing still worth what it's costing? Because awareness, not achievement, is the first form of wealth. Once you see the pattern clearly, you start to want something deeper. Something quieter. Something that doesn't vanish when the applause fades. And that's where the next realization begins. When you understand that money, in its purest form, was never meant to be the goal. It was meant to be a tool. A means to something infinitely rarer. Time. There comes a moment, quiet, subtle, but undeniable, when you begin to understand, money was never the goal. Freedom was. You realize that what you've been chasing all this time wasn't the paper, the status, or the luxury. It was the feeling behind it, the permission to slow down, to breathe, to live life on your own terms. The illusion begins to break. You start to see money for what it truly is. A tool, not a trophy. A servant, not a master. The same fuel that once powered your ambition now begins to feel heavier, like chains around your time. Because you start noticing the paradox. The more money you make, the less time you seem to have. You gain wealth but lose the hours that wealth was meant to protect. That's when the awakening begins. You look around and see the pattern repeating everywhere. People hustling for freedom, but becoming slaves to the hustle. Building empires that trap them inside their own walls. Owning things that end up owning them. It's not malice, it's blindness. We were never taught to define enough. And when enough doesn't exist, every achievement feels incomplete. But wisdom begins where the chase ends. When you finally ask, asterisk, what is all this for? Asterisk, when you stop measuring success by accumulation and start measuring it by alignment. When you realize that true wealth isn't about having everything, it's about needing less. Minimalism isn't about deprivation. It's about discernment. It's about cutting away the excess so you can focus on what truly matters. Because freedom isn't found in abundance, it's found in simplicity. The less clutter in your mind, the more clarity in your path. You begin to redefine wealth. It's no longer about the size of your income, but the size of your peace. No longer about the number of cars, but the number of sunsets you actually get to see. No longer about possessions, but presence. You realize that money, when used consciously, can buy something priceless: time. Time to think. Time to create. Time to sit in silence without guilt. Time to build memories instead of just resumes. Because at the end of it all, that's what every man is really chasing: the ability to live life at his own pace. There's a deep psychological shift here. You stop seeing money as a finish line and start seeing it as leverage. You stop asking, asterisk, how much can I earn? Asterisk, and start asking, asterisk, how much of my life can I reclaim? Asterisk, because the richest man isn't the one who earns the most, it's the one who wakes up and owns his day. Ancient wisdom has always whispered this truth. From Stoicism to Buddhism, from Marcus Aurelius to Lao Tzu, every philosophy has warned us about the trap of endless desire. They all say, in different words, the same thing: mastery of self is greater than mastery of wealth. Because when you control your desires, nothing can control you. But we live in a time where control is disguised as chaos. Every app, every ad, every headline fights for your attention, not your money, but your time. Because attention is the new currency. And when you finally see that, you start protecting it like treasure. This is where discipline transforms from punishment into liberation. You start saying no, not out of fear, but out of freedom. No to distractions that steal your focus. No to opportunities that pull you off your path. No to lifestyles that look good but feel wrong. You begin to trade superficial gain for internal growth. You start valuing peace over profit, clarity over chaos, depth over display. And ironically, that's when money begins to flow differently. It becomes lighter. It serves you instead of owning you. You work with purpose, not pressure. You make choices from vision, not from fear. Because when you stop chasing, you start attracting, not by force, but by alignment. You start designing your life around time instead of tasks. You restructure your days to serve your energy, not your ego. You wake up and ask, asterisk, what matters most today? Asterisk, and you give your best to that. That's how you build a life that feels full, not busy. Here's a principle worth remembering. True wealth is measured by how many days you can live without doing what you don't love. That's the goal. Not endless growth. Not constant achievement. But ownership. Ownership of your time, your attention, your energy. And here's the paradox. When you start valuing time, you use money better. You invest in things that buy freedom, not debt. You seek experiences that feed your spirit, not your image. You begin to see that simplicity isn't a step back, it's a step deeper. Think of it this way. A man with little but time is often richer than the man with everything but peace. Because time is the only currency that doesn't inflate. Once it's spent, it's gone forever. Every second you waste on things that don't matter is a second stolen from the life you were meant to live. So practice this. Once a week, ask yourself, if today were my last day, would I still spend it the same way? Not as a morbid question, but as a clarifying one. It reminds you that urgency is not about rushing, it's about focus. The awareness of death should not create fear, it should create intention. You begin to see that chasing time isn't about escaping work. It's about elevating purpose. It's about building a life that's rich in meaning, not in noise. Because once you understand the true value of time, every decision changes. You stop buying things for validation and start building systems for freedom. You stop chasing every opportunity and start curating the ones that align with your soul. The great paradox of maturity is this. The older you get, the less you want, but the more you value what you have. You stop running after the infinite, and you start refining the finite. You understand that peace is not found in what you add to your life, but in what you remove. And when you reach this stage, this calm realization that less can actually be more, something powerful happens. The noise fades. The world slows down. And for the first time, you start to feel what you were always chasing. Not wealth, not recognition, but freedom. This is the turning point. The heart of the transformation. You no longer chase money for the illusion of control. You use money to reclaim control of the one thing that truly matters, your time. Because once you master that, you don't just live rich, you live free. And that freedom, once tasted, changes everything. It reshapes ambition. It redefines success. It restores peace. And it leads you into the next realization, that freedom is not just an idea. It's a discipline. It's a way of living that must be guarded, practiced, and protected every single day. Freedom, once you taste it, is intoxicating. But it's also fragile. Because the world you live in isn't built for peace. It's built for distraction, for consumption, for comparison. The system doesn't want you free. It wants you busy. Busy buying, busy scrolling, busy proving. And that's why the hardest part of awakening isn't realizing the truth. It's staying awake once you do. You begin to see how modern ambition disguises slavery. How the endless chase for status, likes, and numbers becomes another kind of cage. Invisible, but real. You might not clock in, but you're still trapped. You work through weekends, your phone glued to your hand, your worth tied to metrics that don't even exist outside a screen. We call it progress. We call it hustle. But if your work owns you, if your success controls your peace, you're not free. You're just in a prettier prison. It's a hard truth to swallow. Because we've been conditioned to believe that being busy equals being valuable. That rest equals laziness. That the man who slows down is the man who's falling behind. But falling behind what? Behind whom? We don't even know anymore. We just run because everyone else is running. The philosopher Thoreau once wrote, asterisk, the cost of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Asterisk, and that truth should haunt you a little. Because when you start to measure success in life units, in time, energy, presence, you begin to realize how expensive your habits really are. That late-night grind session isn't free. That toxic partnership, that unnecessary meeting, that hour wasted on envy, they all cost you something irreplaceable. They cost you you. That's when mastery begins. Not mastery over others, but mastery over self. The world says, do more. The wise man says, do less, better. The world says, grind harder. The wise man says, align deeper. Because discipline isn't just about pushing, it's about pruning. Cutting away what doesn't serve your highest purpose so that what remains can grow stronger. Most people think control means domination, over people, money, outcomes. But true control is internal. It's the ability to stay grounded in chaos. To choose peace when everyone else chooses noise. To remain focused when the world keeps flashing distractions in your face. It's not about escaping responsibility. It's about elevating consciousness. You start to understand that modern slavery doesn't wear chains. It wears ambition. It's the illusion that you're choosing your grind, when in reality, your fears are choosing for you. Fear of missing out. Fear of irrelevance. Fear of not being enough. Those fears drive men harder than any boss ever could. And until you face them, they'll keep steering your life from the shadows. But awareness breaks chains. Awareness is rebellion. When you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You start asking questions that society doesn't want you to ask. Asterisk, why am I chasing this? Who benefits from my exhaustion? What if I don't want to play this game anymore? Asterisk, these aren't lazy questions. They're the beginning of wisdom. The ancients spoke of detachment, not as avoidance, but as mastery. To be in the world, but not consumed by it. To engage with money, success, ambition, but not let them define your peace. Detachment is not indifference. It's intelligence. It's understanding the difference between ownership and obsession. When you're detached, you can finally work with money instead of for it. You can use it strategically, to create space, to buy time, to enable meaning. Money becomes a tool of design, not a drug of distraction. You begin to architect your life intentionally, where every choice, every project, every investment serves something higher than your ego. But detachment requires solitude. You have to be willing to step away, from noise, from praise, from validation, long enough to hear your own thoughts again. In solitude, you remember who you are. You remember that your worth isn't in your net worth. That your peace isn't a product, it's a practice. It's in the stillness that strength is rebuilt. Because the man who can sit with silence without seeking escape, that man is dangerous. Not in aggression, but in clarity. He sees through illusion. He moves with intention. He knows that power without peace is just pressure. In this stage, life begins to simplify. You stop chasing status symbols. You stop performing for approval. You start valuing energy more than attention. You begin to realize that most of what once mattered doesn't. The clothes, the car, the numbers, they lose their meaning when you understand that none of them can fill the silence of an unfulfilled life. So, you start building something deeper. Routines that bring peace. Work that brings purpose. Relationships that bring presence. You become intentional with your hours, protective of your energy, selective with your company. You understand that your time is the truest currency, and you spend it wisely. Here's a practice. Once a day, disconnect. For 1 hour, put everything down, your phone, your work, your noise. Sit in the quiet and just be. No music, no scrolling, just silence. Watch how uncomfortable it feels at first. That discomfort is withdrawal, not from boredom, but from overstimulation. It's your mind detoxing from the constant pull of distraction. Sit through it. Because beyond that discomfort lies clarity. And once you begin to taste that clarity, that calm focus, you'll start craving it more than chaos. You'll see how unnecessary half your busyness really was. You'll start saying no, not because you're lazy, but because you're intentional. You'll start designing your days around peace, not pressure. And that's when mastery becomes effortless. Because you're no longer reacting to life, you're directing it. Freedom, at this level, becomes discipline. It's not about doing whatever you want, it's about having the strength to choose what truly matters. It's about creating boundaries that protect your peace. It's about building a life so aligned that distraction feels unnatural. And when you reach that point, the chase ends. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started living. The world may still run its race, but you no longer need to keep up. You've learned that the finish line was never out there. It was always within, waiting for you to stop running long enough to see it. The next stage, then, is about rebuilding. Not your empire, but your rhythm. Learning to live from peace, not for it. To create from rest, not rest from exhaustion. Because once you master detachment, the real work begins. Designing a life that honors your time and your truth. At this point, something profound begins to shift. You've torn down the illusions, faced the noise, and sat in the silence long enough to remember who you are. The chase has lost its grip. The old patterns, the constant proving, performing, pretending, no longer move you. What you crave now isn't more, it's meaning. You begin to rebuild, but differently this time. Not from ambition, but from alignment. This is where intention returns, sharp, calm, powerful. You start asking better questions. What do I actually want my days to feel like? What kind of man do I want to become? What is enough for me? Not for them, not for the world, but for me. Those questions don't just change your goals, they change your identity. You stop trying to look successful and start trying to be free. Redefining wealth is not about rejecting money, it's about reclaiming its purpose. You begin to understand that money is a multiplier. It magnifies whatever energy you bring to it. If you're lost, it deepens the void. If you're grounded, it amplifies peace. So, the goal shifts, no longer to have more, but to live better. You start using money as a tool for creation, not compensation. It stops being your master and becomes your servant. You start building systems, not schedules. Systems that protect your time, automate your stress, and make peace non-negotiable. You stop glorifying burnout and start designing balance. You create boundaries that feel like freedom, routines that sustain you instead of drain you. You realize that discipline is not the opposite of freedom, it's the structure that makes freedom possible. This is the rebirth of intention. Every decision begins to run through a new filter. Asterisk, does this give me peace? Does this give me time? Asterisk, and if the answer is no, it doesn't belong. You simplify not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Because simplicity is the highest form of wealth, the kind that can't be stolen, taxed, or lost in a crash. You begin to find joy in the ordinary again. Slow mornings, deep conversations, walks without phones. You find purpose in presence. You stop chasing adrenaline and start cultivating awareness. You realize that peace isn't passive, it's powerful. It's what allows you to move deliberately, think clearly, and act from vision instead of reaction. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, the state of living in alignment with your higher self, guided by virtue and clarity. It's not about retreating from the world, but engaging with it from a place of inner strength. When you operate from that place, money becomes energy, something you direct, not something that directs you. Here's a truth that feels like a paradox. When you stop chasing money, it starts finding you. Not because of magic, but because of clarity. Clarity attracts opportunity. Peace sharpens focus. Alignment creates consistency. You begin to move differently, calmly, confidently, deliberately. You work fewer hours, but with greater impact. You say less, but mean more. You do less, but everything you do moves mountains. This stage is about designing a life that breathes. A life where rest is strategic, not guilty. Where ambition serves purpose, not ego. Where every choice is filtered through one question: will this move me closer to freedom or further from it? You start building a portfolio not just of assets, but of experiences. You measure wealth not by what you accumulate, but by what you can afford to let go of. It's here that you learn one of the hardest disciplines, the discipline of no. Saying no to quick money that costs you peace. No to people who drain your focus. No to opportunities that distract you from your calling. Because saying no is how you protect your yes. It's how you make room for what matters most. And that yes, that's where your power lives. The yes to your craft. The yes to your purpose. The yes to your family, your health, your solitude. The yes to moments that don't scale, but still matter. The yes to time, the truest luxury there is. You start to see how true wealth isn't flashy, it's quiet. It's mornings that belong to you. It's work that doesn't feel like war. It's peace that isn't conditional. It's walking through life without hurry, without envy, without proving anything to anyone. That's wealth. That's freedom. That's the success most men never reach because they never stop long enough to define it. And make no mistake, this transformation isn't soft. It takes strength to walk away from the noise. It takes discipline to not chase every opportunity. It takes courage to build slow, to live simple, to prioritize peace in a world addicted to chaos. But that's what separates the man who's rich in image from the man who's rich in life. There's a principle worth remembering. Asterisk, you don't own wealth. You manage it. Asterisk, and the most valuable form of wealth is invisible. Your time, your attention, your energy. Protect them ruthlessly. Because every time you give them away without purpose, you dilute the life you're meant to live. So, create rituals that preserve your power. Set hours where you don't work. Walk daily without headphones. Journal your gratitude before you check your goals. Celebrate stillness like success. These aren't small habits, they're declarations of sovereignty. They say, I control my time. I control my pace. I decide what matters. This part of the journey is about becoming intentional, not impulsive, strategic, not reactive, present, not distracted. You learn that mastery isn't about domination, it's about direction. Every man must reach this crossroads and choose, do I want to keep chasing, or do I want to start creating? Because once you choose creation, once you start designing a life that honors time instead of sacrificing it, you begin to live differently. You begin to lead differently. You begin to breathe differently. You start to experience the quiet power of being free within yourself. And that, ultimately, is the point of all this: to evolve from chasing money to creating meaning. To trade noise for clarity, chaos for rhythm, ambition for purpose. You stop running toward the horizon and start building from where you stand. This is where the man becomes whole again. Not because he gave up on success, but because he redefined it. Not because he stopped working, but because he started living. This is the stage of renewal, the place where the hustle turns holy and work becomes worship. And it leads to the final revelation, the realization that true wealth was never out there. It was always here, in your time, your peace, and your power to choose how you spend both. There's a quietness that comes when the chase finally ends. Not a silence of defeat, but a peace of understanding. You've run long enough, sacrificed enough, and seen enough to know that more is not the answer. Presence is. The noise fades, and in its place comes clarity. Wealth was never the finish line. It was the byproduct of living aligned. You start walking differently now. No rush, no panic, no competition. Because you've realized that life was never a race, it was a rhythm. You were never meant to sprint forever. You were meant to move with intention, to build with purpose, to rest without guilt. Time, the thing you once traded away so easily, now feels sacred. Every minute counts. Every hour has weight. Every day has meaning. You look back at the version of yourself that chased endlessly, the man who believed freedom was a future event, a reward for hard work. You don't judge him. You thank him. Because without that hunger, you wouldn't have learned. Without that obsession, you wouldn't have seen the truth. Growth begins with greed, but it matures into gratitude. You had to lose time to learn its worth. Now, you chase differently. You don't chase status. You chase stillness. You don't chase attention. You chase awareness. You don't chase success. You chase peace. Because you finally understand that time is the only currency that truly belongs to you. Every dollar, every object, every achievement is borrowed. But time, that's yours to spend, and once it's gone, no fortune can buy it back. So you start treating time like treasure. You guard it. You invest it. You refuse to waste it on anything or anyone that doesn't align with your peace. You measure wealth not in numbers, but in moments, in laughter that feels real, in mornings that aren't rushed, in conversations that touch the soul. You realize that freedom isn't something you buy, it's something you build. It's built through discipline, through choices that align with what you value, through saying no more often than yes, through understanding that peace requires boundaries. You stop apologizing for protecting your time because you finally grasp the truth: if you don't own your hours, someone else will. You start simplifying everything. Your work becomes cleaner. Your circle becomes smaller. Your focus becomes sharper. You no longer measure success by external applause, but by internal peace. You no longer seek to be impressive. You seek to be intentional. And in that simplicity, you find depth. Because simplicity doesn't mean having less, it means carrying only what matters. You begin to see time not as something to fill, but as something to honor. You don't rush through mornings anymore. You don't live for weekends. You stop treating your life like a countdown and start living it like a composition, every note deliberate, every pause intentional. You begin to understand what the ancients meant when they said, a man who masters his time masters his life. The modern world still moves fast around you, but you no longer react to it. You move from a place of calm power. You've learned that your presence is your greatest leverage. When you are centered, your decisions carry weight. When you are still, your vision expands. When you are peaceful, you become unstoppable. Not because you do more, but because you waste nothing. And that's the irony. When you stop chasing, things begin to chase you. Opportunities, ideas, alignment, they start finding their way to you because you've created space for them. You've removed the noise. You've made room for flow. That's not luck. That's clarity in motion. Because clarity always attracts creation. You now see money for what it truly is, energy, not identity. It moves toward peace and away from chaos. It rewards discipline and flees disorder. When you align your time, your energy, and your purpose, abundance naturally follows. Not because you force it, but because you've become a vessel for it. You've stopped fighting for control and started flowing with awareness. Here's the ultimate lesson. Time is wealth, and awareness is its guardian. Every moment you spend consciously is an investment. Every moment you spend unconsciously is a debt. So live aware. Speak slow. Move with intention. Protect your focus like it's sacred, because it is. You can rebuild money. You can't rebuild time. And maybe that's the wisdom every man must reach eventually, that the greatest luxury isn't found in what you own, but in how you live. Freedom isn't about quitting work, it's about working in alignment with who you are. Peace isn't about avoiding struggle, it's about mastering it. Success isn't about arrival, it's about awareness. So, walk slower, breathe deeper, think clearer. Let the world rush if it wants to. You've learned the rhythm of your own life. You know that wealth without time is poverty disguised as progress. You know that the truest form of success is the ability to say, I'm not in a hurry. At this point, your life becomes your message. Every action reflects the truth you've discovered, that freedom isn't a fantasy, it's a discipline. It's in your habits, your focus, your patience. It's in how you spend your minutes, not how you multiply your assets. And when you live like that, when your time serves your purpose, you become untouchable. Because no one can control a man who owns his hours. So this is where the journey ends, and begins again. Not with another chase, but with a choice. To live slow, to live aware, to live free, to understand that you can lose money and recover. You can lose status and rebuild. But when you lose time, it's gone forever. That's why now, you don't chase money. You chase time. Because time is life. And once you master your time, you've mastered everything.